Revelation chapter 6. The opening of the seals. The scroll is now in the hand of the Lamb, and the Lamb begins to open it. What was sealed is unsealed. The things that must soon take place begin to move. Chapter 6 carries the first 6 of the 7 seals, and the rhythm is deliberate. The first 4 come in a set, each announced by one of the 4 living creatures, each loosing a rider on a colored horse. The 5th turns from the earth to the altar and to the souls of those already killed. The 6th tears the sky itself. The 7th is held back. It will not open until chapter 8, and the delay is part of the design. The reader is meant to feel the held breath. The first seal, the white horse. Verses 1 and 2. Now I watched when the Lamb opened one of the 7 seals. And I heard one of the 4 living creatures say with a voice like thunder, "Come!" And I looked, and behold, a white horse, and its rider had a bow, and a crown was given to him. And he came out conquering, and to conquer. The Lamb opens the first seal, and one of the 4 living creatures speaks with a voice like thunder, a single word. Come. Ercho. The older translations sometimes render it, come and see, as though the creature is inviting John to look, but the better manuscripts have only the one word, and it is most naturally a summons to the rider himself. The creature calls, and the horse comes out. Heaven is commanding these riders. They do not break loose on their own. They are loosed, each at the call of one of the creatures nearest the throne. Whatever rides out of the scroll rides out under authority. And the first is a white horse, and its rider holds a bow, and a crown is given him, and he goes out conquering and to conquer. Here is the most debated figure in the chapter, and honesty requires laying the question open rather than settling it by force. The difficulty is that white in Revelation is almost everywhere the color of heaven and of Christ. And in chapter 19, a rider on a white horse, who is called faithful and true, the Word of God, goes out to conquer. So one old and serious reading takes this first rider to be Christ, or the victorious advance of the gospel going out into the world ahead of the judgments that follow. But there are strong reasons to read this rider differently, and the immediate context presses against the gospel reading. The 3 riders who follow him are unmistakably destroyers: war, famine, death. They are a set, called out one after another by the same formula. And the natural sense is that the first belongs with them, that all 4 are judgments, not that one is salvation and 3 are calamity. The crown given to this rider is the Stephanos, the victor's wreath, not the royal diadema that the rider of chapter 19 wears, where he is crowned with many diademata. And the bow, without a named arrow, the lone weapon, would have carried a particular resonance for John's first readers, because the mounted archer was the signature of the Parthian armies on Rome's eastern frontier, the one enemy Rome feared and could not finally subdue. Read this way: the first rider is conquest itself, the spirit of military victory and the lust to subdue, going out across the world and across the years that John's readers were about to live through. Conquest is the first of the 4, because conquest is what opens the door to the rest. War follows the conqueror, famine follows war, and death follows famine. The text does not finally name him, and a careful reader can hold the question open. But the weight of the immediate context, the company he keeps, the wreath rather than the diadem, and the bare bow all lean toward reading the first rider as conquest rather than Christ. The 4 together are the classic judgments of a world at war with itself, the very judgments the Old Testament had long warned would fall on a covenant people who broke faith. The second seal, the red horse. Verses 3 and 4. When he opened the second seal, I heard the second living creature say, "Come." And out came another horse, bright red. Its rider was permitted to take peace from the earth, so that people would slay one another. And he was given a great sword. The second creature calls, and a second horse comes out. Pidos, fiery red, the color of blood and flame. Its rider is given a task stated with chilling precision. He is permitted to take peace from the earth, so that people would slay one another. Not to make war between nations only, but to remove peace itself, so that men turn their swords on one another. The Greek sphazo used here, to slaughter, is the same brutal word used of the slaying of the lamb in the previous chapter, and of the martyrs in the seal that follows. The violence is mutual and internal, people slaughtering people. For readers who would live through the Jewish war, this was not an abstraction. The historian who recorded that war described a city and a nation that tore itself apart from within, faction against faction, the slaughter inside the walls rivaling anything Rome did from without. Peace was taken from the land, and they slew one another. And the rider is given a great sword, the passive again, the sword handed to him. Even the removal of peace is permitted, measured, under the authority of the throne that opened the seal. The third seal, the black horse. Verses 5 and 6. When he opened the third seal, I heard the third living creature say, "Come." And I looked, and behold, a black horse, and its rider had a pair of scales in his hand. And I heard what seemed to be a voice in the midst of the four living creatures, saying, "A quart of wheat for a denarius, and 3 quarts of barley for a denarius, and do not harm the oil and the wine." The third horse is black, the color of want and mourning, and its rider carries a zygos, a balance scale, the instrument of the marketplace. When food is weighed out on scales and sold by the measure, it means food has become scarce and precious. And a voice from among the living creatures sets the prices, and the prices tell the story. A choynix of wheat, about a day's ration for one person, costs a denarian, a full day's wage. A man could work a whole day and earn just enough wheat to feed himself, with nothing left for his family. Or he could buy the coarser barley, 3 measures of it, and stretch it across them at the cost of everything he earned. This is famine, not total absence of food, but food priced beyond reach. The slow, grinding scarcity that follows when war has trampled the fields and broken the supply. And then a strange restraint. Do not harm the oil and the wine. The olive and the vine, with their deeper roots, survive what destroys the grain. And they were also the goods of the comfortable, the staples of those who still had means. The line cuts 2 ways. It marks the limit set on the judgment, for it is permitted to go this far and no further. And it exposes the bitter inequality of famine, where the poor cannot afford bread, while the oil and the wine of the wealthy go untouched. The judgment is real, and it is also measured, restrained even in its severity by the hand that loosed it. The fourth seal, the pale horse. Verses 7 and 8. When he opened the fourth seal, I heard the voice of the fourth living creature say, "Come." And I looked, and behold, a pale horse, and its rider's name was Death, and Hades followed him. And they were given authority over 1/4 of the earth, to kill with sword, and with famine, and with pestilence, and by the wild beasts of the earth. The fourth horse is Chloros, a word that means pale green, the sickly gray green of a corpse, the color of death in a face from which the blood has gone. And this rider alone is named, His name is Death, Thanatos, and Hades, the realm of the dead, follows close behind him to gather what he kills. The first 3 riders carried implements. This one is the thing itself. He is given authority over 1/4 of the earth, a limit again, 1/4 and not the whole, and the means of killing are listed: sword, famine, pestilence, and the wild beasts. These 4 are not a random list. They are the 4 great judgments of the covenant, named together in Ezekiel, where the Lord speaks of sending his 4 sore judgments upon Jerusalem: sword and famine and wild beasts and pestilence, to cut off from it man and beast. They stand behind the curses of Leviticus, the covenant sanctions threatened against a people who would break faith. John's first 4 seals are those same 4 judgments, riding out in order. This is the deepest key to reading them. The horsemen are not merely the general miseries of human history, though they are that too. They are specifically the covenant curses, the judgments long promised against a people who had been warned, now loosed upon the world of the first century and upon the city that had filled up the measure of its unfaithfulness. The Lamb who was slain opens the scroll, and out of it ride the very judgments Moses and Ezekiel had foretold. The 5th seal, the souls under the altar. Verses 9 through 11. When he opened the 5th seal, I saw under the altar the souls of those who had been slain for the word of God and for the witness they had borne. They cried out with a loud voice, "O sovereign Lord, holy and true, how long before you will judge and avenge our blood on those who dwell on the earth?" Then they were each given a white robe and told to rest a little longer, until the number of their fellow servants and their brothers should be complete, who were to be killed as they themselves had been. With the 5th seal, the vision turns. The 4 horsemen rode across the earth. Now John is shown what lies beneath the altar in heaven. There he sees psychas, souls, the souls of those who had already been killed. And the reason for their killing is stated in the 2 phrases that have run through the whole book: for the word of God and for the witness they had borne. These are the martyrs. They were slain, esphagmenon, the same word again, the slaughter word, the word used of the Lamb. They died as the Lamb died, and they are gathered now under the altar, the place where, in the temple, the blood of the sacrifices was poured out at the base. Their lifeblood was poured out like a sacrifice, and so they rest at the foot of the altar where sacrificial blood belongs. And they cry out, and their cry is the great question of the persecuted in every age. How long? Heos pote. How long before you judge and avenge our blood? They address God as despotes, sovereign master, the word for the owner of a household or of slaves, the one with absolute right. And they call him holy and true, the very titles the risen Christ took to himself in the letters. This is not a cry of personal vengeance, a thirst for private revenge. It is a cry for justice, for the moral order of the universe to be set right, for the God who is holy and true to act as holy and true, and not to let the blood of the innocent soak into the ground forever without reckoning. It is the same cry that Abel's blood cried from the ground, the cry the prophets raised, the cry the weeping prophet of the previous chapter felt pressing on him when he feared the scroll might stay shut. And they are given 2 things. First, a white robe, stole leuke, each one, the garment of vindication and purity and rest, the visible sign that heaven has already declared them righteous, though the earth condemned them. And second, a word about timing, and it is the hinge of the whole passage. They are told to rest, eti chronon mikron, a little longer, a short time still, until the number of their fellow servants who are to be killed as they were is filled up. Plerothosin, completed, brought to the full. The answer to how long is not forever and not immediately, but a little longer. There is a number, known to God, of those who will yet die for the witness, and when that number is complete, the reckoning comes. The judgment is certain, the timing is set, and the interval is short. For readers standing in the years before the great judgment fell, the word "a little longer" was not a 1,000-year deferral. It was the language of imminence, the same urgency that opened the book. The wait is real, but it is brief, and it is measured by the filling of a number, not by the endless turning of the ages. The sixth seal. The day of Ernst. Verses 12 through 17. When he opened the sixth seal, I looked, and behold, there was a great earthquake, and the sun became black as sackcloth. The full moon became like blood, and the stars of the sky fell to the earth as the fig tree sheds its winter fruit when shaken by a gale. The sky vanished like a scroll that is being rolled up, and every mountain and island was removed from its place. The sixth seal tears the heavens. An earthquake, the sun blackened like coarse mourning cloth, the moon turned to blood. The stars of the sky fell to the earth the way a fig tree, struck by a great wind, drops the green figs that never ripened. The sky itself rolled up like a scroll, every mountain and island shaken out of place. It is the language of the universe coming undone, and a modern reader instinctively reads it as the literal end of the physical world. But this is the place above all others in the chapter where the Old Testament must be allowed to teach us how to read. This imagery is not new with John. It is the settled, conventional language the Hebrew prophets used for the fall of nations and the collapse of world powers. When Isaiah pronounced the doom of Babylon, he said the stars would not give their light, the sun would be darkened, the moon would not shine, and he said the heavens would tremble, and the earth be shaken out of its place. When Isaiah pronounced judgment on Edom, he said the sky would be rolled up like a scroll, and all its host would fall as leaves fall from the vine. When Ezekiel foretold the fall of Egypt, he said God would cover the heavens and darken the stars, cover the sun with a cloud, and the moon would not give its light. When Joel described the day of the Lord coming upon Jerusalem, he said the sun would be turned to darkness and the moon to blood. None of these prophets was describing the literal extinction of the cosmos. Babylon fell, Edom fell, Egypt fell, and the sun kept rising. They were describing, in the highest and most terrible language available, the fall of a great power, the end of a world, the collapse of an entire order of things under the judgment of God. John is using that language, and using it deliberately, drawing his sun and moon and stars and rolled-up sky directly from those very prophets. Within the frame of this book, whose own opening insisted that its events were near and must soon take place, the most natural reading is that the sixth seal portrays the same kind of event the prophets portrayed: the collapse of an old order, the shaking of the heavens and the earth that marked the end of the old covenant world, and the judgment that fell on Jerusalem and its temple in that generation. The sun, moon, and stars were, in prophetic idiom, the rulers and powers and the whole established firmament of a society. To see them fall is to see a world end. The imagery communicates total collapse of what was and would have been understood by the first hearers as referring primarily to events near their own time. It should be said plainly that the language also reaches further than its first referent. The prophet's cosmic imagery always carried a forward pull, gathering up every fall of every proud power into a pattern that points, finally, to the last judgment of all. The shaking of one age foreshadows the shaking of the age to come. So a reader is not wrong to feel the ultimate day standing behind this one. But the primary referent, the event this seal first portrayed for the people who first heard it, is near, not far. The judgment that was even then about to fall, described in the only language vast enough to carry it. And then John shows us the response, and it sweeps across the whole social order, top to bottom. Then the kings of the earth, and the great ones, and the generals, and the rich and the powerful, and everyone, slave and free, hid themselves in the caves and among the rocks of the mountains, calling to the mountains and rocks, "Fall on us and hide us from the face of him who is seated on the throne, and from the wrath of the Lamb. For the great day of their wrath has come, and who can stand?" 7 classes of people are named, from the kings at the top to the slave at the bottom. A deliberate sweep meant to include everyone, the whole pyramid of human power and powerlessness. And all of them do the same thing. They hide. They scramble into caves and beg the mountains to fall on them. The image comes from the prophets again, from Isaiah's vision of men creeping into caves and holes in the ground, from before the terror of the Lord. And from Hosea's word that they would cry to the mountains, "Cover us," the very words the Lord himself spoke on the way to the cross, telling the daughters of Jerusalem that the day was coming when they would say to the mountains, "Fall on us." John's readers, hearing that, would have caught the link. The day Jesus warned of, weeping over the city, is the day now portrayed under the 6th seal. And the thing they are hiding from is named with terrible irony: the wrath of the Lamb. The orge tu arnio, the anger of the little lamb. The slain lamb, the gentlest image in the book, the one who was slaughtered and bought a people with his blood, is now the one before whose face the kings of the earth flee in terror. There is no contradiction. The Lamb's wrath is the wrath of the rejected sacrifice, the settled judgment of the one who offered mercy at the price of his own blood and was refused. Those who will not be saved by the Lamb must finally face the Lamb. And the chapter ends not with an answer, but with a question hanging in the air, the question every fleeing soul is screaming. The great day of their wrath has come, and who can stand? Tis dinatai stathenai. Who is able to stand? The question is left unanswered, and that is by design. The 6th seal ends, and the 7th does not immediately open. Between them, in the next chapter, John will be shown the answer to who can stand, before a single one of the fleeing kings is told. The ones who can stand will be the sealed servants of God, marked and protected, and the great multitude in white before the throne. But that answer is held back for a chapter so that the question can do its work first. For now, the chapter closes on the terror of those who have no answer, hiding in the rocks, with the day of wrath fallen, and no ground under their feet that will not move. The reader is left, deliberately, with the question ringing. When the old world is shaken to pieces and the face on the throne is finally seen, who can stand?